Be careful of the empath who has no friends. When you see them by themselves, you might see a victim. You think they are weak or that they have broken down, but you are mistaken. They did not break, they woke up. Carl Jung showed that real power does not look for fame, it looks for quiet. The empath who stays alone has not escaped from life. They have just stopped feeding the mess around them. They are not hiding, they are taking control of their own lives. This is what makes them dangerous, because the person you think you know is gone. You can no longer understand them or control them. Their kindness is no longer a gift you can just take. It is a mirror that you will be afraid to look into. In this talk, we reveal why the lonely empath is not the weakest person in the room, but the strongest soul you will ever misjudge. Their choice to be alone was not an accident. It started as a way to save themselves. Being alone was the only way to keep from losing who they are. There is a common lie that people who stay by themselves are just awkward or bad at talking to others. This is a very simple way of looking at a deep mental process. No person who is built to connect with others chooses to be alone without a very big reason. Science calls this sensory overload, but some call it a debt of energy. The empath is not hiding, they are paying that debt back. This state is not just a personality trait, it is what happens when you have had too much. Their solitude makes sense when you see how their body and mind really work. Carl Jung said the mind is a system that fixes itself, just like the physical body. When the body gets too hot, it sweats to cool down. This is not a choice, it is nature. When the mind deals with too much emotion for many years, it turns itself off to prevent a total collapse. The silence you see is that safety switch working. For most of their life, this person likely lived without any protection. Their mind was wide open. In a room full of people, you might hear the talk, but the empath feels what is not being said. They notice the tightness in a person's face or the small shake in a voice. They do not just see these things, they take them deep inside. Their internal system is always running a long race of processing feelings. Jung spoke about a state where people cannot tell the difference between their own feelings and the feelings of others. The empath lived this way every day. They were always merging and carrying the weight of everyone else. But a machine cannot run at full speed forever without breaking the motor. Most people can walk into a room, feel a bad mood, and forget it in 5 minutes. The empath carries it for 5 days. They were the ones who stayed on the phone for hours listening to a friend's problems. Not because they wanted to, but because they could actually feel the friend's pain and needed to fix it to find peace. This was total. Before they pulled away, there was too much connection, not a lack of it. They were soaked in it. The pulling away you see now is an emergency brake. It is a fix. The mind, which always wants balance, realized the person was going to disappear into the needs of others. It forced a retreat. This is why being alone feels so right to them now. It is not a choice they can turn off for a night. It is a tool for survival. This is where most people get them wrong. You might look at them and see someone who is avoiding life or someone who is sad. But inside, they are finally protecting their life. They have reached a point where one more drop of someone else's emotion would make them overflow. They are not against people. They are just full. The warning here is about your guess that they are lonely and need saving. You think that because you are afraid to be alone, they must be afraid too. But you are putting your own needs onto them. They have turned their energy inward. Jung called this true introversion. It is not being shy. It is taking back the energy that was leaking out into the world. When you try to pull them back out, you are making a mistake. You are trying to drag them back into the noise that almost destroyed them. You think you are offering a connection, but to them, it looks like a threat. They spent years building a wall to keep their own sanity safe. This was the only way they could survive being so sensitive. They learned that their empathy was a weakness before it was a gift. Without this wall, they would have been eaten up by the needs of people around them. So they built a boundary. If you are ready to stop seeing being alone as a weakness, stay with us. We are building a place for those who are leaving fake connections to find their true selves. The story of the lonely empath is a story of loss. It is not that things were stolen by force, but that they gave parts of themselves away until nothing was left. This giving was rarely a choice. It was something they felt they had to do because of how they were raised. Often the empath child was the one who had to keep the peace at home. A family is a system that wants to be steady. If parents are not mature or are messy with their feelings, the sensitive child steps in to help. They become the good one, or the listener. Jung argued that the mask we wear for the world is often made to stay safe. For the empath, that mask was always being available. They learned early that they were only worth something if they were useful. If they could calm a parent's anger, they were safe. If they could listen to a friend, they were liked. They became the healers and the unpaid therapists. When there was a fight at work, they were the ones people complained to. This creates a bad balance. The empath gives energy out, but nothing comes back in. They become a well that everyone drinks from until it is dry. Over many years, this creates a deep hole. You can see this in how they used to act. They would say yes to a favor, even when they were exhausted, because the other person's comfort mattered more than their own health. They believed listening was their duty. That heavy feeling in their chest when the phone rang was their body screaming for help. They let people cross their lines because they thought boundaries were bad. But the mind keeps a record. Every time they hid their own needs to help someone else, a debt was made. Every time they stayed quiet to keep the peace, the pressure grew. They gave away their time and life force until the bank was empty. The day comes when the empath wakes up and realizes they have nothing left to give. The habit of giving just breaks. This is usually when they vanish from their social groups. The people around them get confused or mad. They say things have changed and that the empath used to be nice. They feel let down because the person who helped them is gone. But the empath has not turned mean. They have just stopped being a tool for others. Jung warned that if we try too hard to be what others want, we lose ourselves. The lonely empath is someone who had to take off the helper mask because it was too heavy. They realized their goodness was actually destroying them. When they leave, they are not punishing you. They are trying to save themselves. They are calling back their energy and closing the accounts. They spent their lives fixing others while their own heart was dying. This is why they end up with no friends. The old friendships were based on them always being there. Those friendships cannot live in this new reality. The empath sees their phone and sees people who want things, not people who care. The answer to all of it is silence. They have learned that in their past, they were a product, not a partner. To keep those friends would mean going back to the old way, and they can no longer afford that. The price to be in their life has changed. It used to be free, but now it requires real balance that most people cannot give. Do not think you can pull them back to the old way. Those who once gave everything now give nothing by default. They have retired from managing your feelings. People often think the lonely empath is harmless, but they do not see that this calm person has already faced their own dark side. People think empaths are just sweet souls, but that misses the truth. Real change happens when they stop trying to be only good and accept their bad parts, too. Jung called this the shadow. It is the part of us we try to hide, like anger or being selfish. For years, the empath pushed these feelings down. They thought they were not allowed to be angry or put themselves first. They thought being aggressive was a failure, but you cannot hide those feelings forever. As they got tired of giving too much, the shadow started to show. They began to feel a secret disgust for people who were too needy. They started to dream about walking away. The change happens when the empath stops fighting these feelings. They realize their anger is a signal that they are being used. It is their mind trying to protect them. When the empath accepts this, they change. They are no longer just harmless. A harmless person cannot do anything. A strong person can do something but chooses not to. The new empath is capable of cutting you off. They can say no without saying sorry. They can watch you struggle with your own mess without jumping in to save you. They no longer care about looking nice. This makes it impossible for people to trick them. Most people try to control others by making them feel like a bad person. They say things like, "I thought you cared about me." They are betting you are afraid of being seen as selfish. But the lonely empath has already accepted that they are selfish enough to survive. When you say they have changed or are cold, they just agree. They know the coldness is a boundary. This makes emotional tricks fail. You cannot shame someone who has already accepted their limits. You cannot make someone feel guilty when they have decided their own life is more important than your comfort. This is where they become dangerous, not because they attack, but because they no longer react. People who use others need a reaction. When they cannot get to the empath or move them, they are forced to face their own weakness. This is scary for people who are used to being in control. The buttons that used to work, such as guilt, duty, praise, and the cold shoulder, are now broken. The connections have been severed. The empath looks at you with a steady, calm expression, and you can sense that they are not hunting for your approval. They are not scared of your opinions. Jung taught that accepting the darker parts of oneself is the necessary road to becoming a whole person. The empath loner has become complete by taking back their power to say no. They have reclaimed the strength of refusal. This makes them powerful. They are no longer acting from a place of lack, begging for affection by trying to be perfect. They are acting from a place of independence. They understand that they have a darker side, a part of them that loves being alone, a part that observes critically, and a part that turns things away. And they use that darker side to protect their inner light. They use their distance as a guard for their kindness. They keep no friends because most social circles require them to hide their true selves. Most people want the polite, easy version of the empath. They do not want the person who sets firm limits. They do not want the person who speaks the truth even when it feels awkward. The empath knows this. They know that having friends often means going back into the prison of being nice, and they would rather be alone in the dark than trapped in a fake light. In the next part, we will look outward to see why this new internal state causes such a strong and uncomfortable reaction in everyone they meet, and why you might feel uneasy when you stand near them. The presence of an empath loner is often described as chilling, scary, or bothersome by those who meet them. People feel a strange tension in their company, a feeling that something is missing from the talk. This tension is not caused by what the empath is doing. It is caused by what the empath is not doing. Most human interactions are unspoken deals for mutual support. When two people meet, they are usually busy with a hidden trade. One person shows an identity, and the other person reflects it back. You tell a joke. I laugh to show you are funny. You moan about your job. I nod to agree you are a victim. You share an idea. I agree to show we are on the same team. Jung called this a form of unconscious sharing where the ego looks for proof of its existence through another person. We use each other as mirrors. We look into the faces of our friends to see a nice reflection of ourselves. The empath loner has stopped playing the mirror. They have pulled their energy out of this reflection game. When you stand before them, they do not automatically show your self-image back to you. They do not laugh if something is not funny. They do not offer pity if they feel your pain is your own fault. They do not nod just to stop the silence. They simply watch. They listen. They stay neutral. This neutrality feels like an attack to a person who is hooked on validation. When you throw your identity at them and they do not catch it, that image falls to the floor. You are left standing there with your own messy energy. You feel seen. You feel judged, even though they have not said a single mean word. The discomfort you feel is the fear of the void. We rely on the social oil of small talk and fake kindness to hide the fact that we are all separate. The empath loner refuses to use that oil. They let the friction happen. They let the silence go on until it feels heavy. For the normal person, this is hard to bear. Think about a time you tried to talk to someone who just looked at you quietly without helping you keep the conversation going. You likely felt a rush of stress. You might have tried to get a reaction just to break the ice, asking personal questions, being dramatic, or sharing too much. You are trying to pull them back into the game of emotional back and forth. But the empath does not pick up the racket. Jung would say that the empath has become a blank wall for the projections of others, because they are not sending out a clear signal of, I like you or I need you. The other person's mind starts making things up. People project their own fears onto the silence. If you are worried about your brains, you will see the empath's silence as being a snob. If you are worried about your social status, you will see their solitude as being stuck up. If you are carrying hidden guilt about your own choices, you will feel that they are quietly blaming you. You are not seeing the empath, you are seeing your own shadow shown in the stillness of their face. This is why they are so often labeled wrongly. They are called cold, arrogant, distant, or strange. These names are shields. It is easier to call the loner broken than to face the worry that their silence causes in you. The empath loner knows this process very well. They have seen it happen many times. They know that as soon as they stop playing the part of the friendly listener, people turn against them. They know that their lack of need is seen as a rejection, and in a way it is a rejection. It is a rejection of the fake self. The empath is quietly signaling that they will no longer take part in talks that are not real. They are not willing to fake a bond just to make you feel okay. This honesty is tough. It peels away the social mask and leaves the meeting raw. Most people cannot handle this rawness. They leave the talk feeling tired and mixed up, blaming the empath for bad vibes, when in reality, the empath simply refused to carry those vibes for them. The empath keeps no friends because they are tired of the show. They know that to keep people around, they would have to start mirroring them again. They would have to pretend to care about small drama. They would have to hide their own thoughts. They are no longer willing to pay that cost. They would rather be bothered by their own solitude than comforted by a lie. In the next part, we will look at the exact moment the rules changed, the crossing of a mental line that makes going back to the old ways impossible. There is a specific point in the mental growth of the empath where the basic way their mind works changes forever. This is not a slow move. It is a sharp break. Before this point, the main rule of their life was connection. After this point, the main rule becomes truth. This change represents a total flip of their energy. For most of their life, the empath's reactions were a reflex. It happened faster than thinking. If a person in front of them was sad, the empath's body copied that sadness right away. If someone was mad, the empath's nerves felt a threat and tried to calm things down. The wall between the self and the other was thin, letting outside feelings flood in without any check. This was the time of unconscious blending, but the pain of being constantly drained forces the mind to grow. The empath loner is someone who is going through a tough process of what Carl Jung called becoming an individual. This is the mental path of becoming a separate, unique person away from the group. To become an individual, one must stop blending in. The empath has crossed the line where thinking comes before feeling. In the past, the order was feel, then think. Now the order is think, then decide whether to feel. When they meet a new person or talk with an old friend, the old brain paths try to act, the urge to open up, to help, to comfort, to fix. But a new guard in the mind steps in. It creates a pause. In that pause, the empath asks a cold, smart question. Is this talk true for me, or is it just a habit? This question changes the whole world of their relationships. It means that access to their inner heart is no longer free. It is now earned. The empath stops being a public park that anyone can walk through and becomes a private home with a locked door. This shift creates a big change in behavior that often puzzles and pushes away those who knew them before. The empath stops offering to help for no reason. They stop giving advice that wasn't asked for. They stop rushing to fix quiet moments. They stop fixing problems that belong to other people. They realize that much of what they used to call helping or being a good friend was actually getting in the way. By constantly saving others from their own feelings, they were stopping those people from facing their own truth. Jung pointed out that every person must carry the weight of their own life, and that to carry it for them is to steal their growth. The empath loner has learned this lesson. They step back. They let people fail. They let people sit in their own mess. This is the crossing of the line. It is the moment they realize that their main job is not to make the world feel good, but to keep their own soul honest. Once this line is crossed, the old social tricks that people use to control them stop working. In the past, people could use the empath's memories. They would say, "We have been friends for 10 years, suggesting that time means you have to put up with bad treatment. The empath now rejects this logic. They see that the closeness of the past was often based on them giving in and having no rules. They realize that the friend misses the version of them that was easy to use, not the person they really are. People used to be able to use guilt. A friend might say, "I really need you right now," using their problem to demand instant help. The empath now looks at the request without getting emotional. They ask, "Do you need me specifically, or do you just need someone to watch your drama?" They have learned to tell the difference between a real cry for help and a demand for attention. They have built a shield against emotional pressure. This is not because they have stopped caring. It is because they have started caring more about facts than about feelings. They can see the machine behind the talk. They can see the hook hidden inside the bait. When someone tries to make them feel guilty, they see that guilt not as a command to help, but as a sign of the other person's habit of using people. This new level of looking closely makes it almost impossible to keep them as a casual friend. Casual friendship usually depends on being a little bit blind. We agree to ignore each other's small tricks. We agree to play along with small lies to keep the peace. The empath loner refuses to play this game. They have developed a type of vision that sees human motives clearly. They look at the tiny signs in a talk. They notice when someone cuts them off all the time. They notice when a question is not a real question, but just a way for the other person to talk about themselves. They notice when someone's voice does not match their words. In the past, they would have ignored these warning signs to keep the bond. Now they treat these signs as stop signals. They cannot unsee what they see. They cannot go back to the simple days where they thought everyone had good goals. Jung suggested that being aware is a heavy load because it separates you from the group. The empath has accepted this load. They know that many people use the name of friendship as a way to take things, getting what they want without giving anything back. The final awakening. The journey of the empath loner concludes with a final shift in how they view the world. They move from a state of survival to a state of quiet power. They no longer feel the need to explain their distance to others because they realize that those who benefit from the lack of boundaries will always see a boundary as an attack. This is the stage of radical self-acceptance. In this space, the empath realizes that being alone is not a punishment for being difficult, but a reward for being honest. They start to find beauty in the silence that once felt empty. They no longer scan the room for other people's needs. Instead, they check in with their own heart. This creates a person who is centered and impossible to shake. This internal strength changes the way they move through life. They become more selective with their energy, treating it like a rare resource. They understand that their light is not a public utility for everyone to use, but a fire that must be tended and protected. When they do choose to connect with someone, that connection is deep and real because it is no longer based on a performance. They seek out other whole individuals who do not need mirrors, but rather companions on a path of truth. They find that while their circle has become smaller, the quality of their life has become much larger. They have finally traded the noise of the crowd for the music of their own soul. The shift toward truth and away from social masks leads to a final state of being. The empath loner stops being a victim of their own sensitivity and begins to see it as a tool for clarity. This is the stage of quiet power. They no longer feel the need to explain why they are distant. They understand that people who benefit from a lack of boundaries will always see a boundary as an attack. They stop trying to convince others that they are a good person. They realize that their value is not based on how much they give or how well they listen, but on their simple existence. This is the birth of a true individual who is no longer tethered to the opinions of the group. In this new state, the empath discovers that solitude is not a hole to be filled, but a garden to be tended. They find that the silence which used to feel heavy now feels light and clean. Without the noise of other people's expectations, they can finally hear their own inner voice. They begin to trust their gut feelings without looking for outside proof. This makes them even more mysterious to the world. Because they do not seek attention, they naturally draw it, but they do not use that attention to boost their ego. They use it as a filter. They watch who is drawn to their silence and who is scared by it. The final realization is that they are not broken. For years, they may have thought they were flawed because they couldn't just fit in or be normal. Now they see that their inability to fit in was actually a protection. It was their soul's way of keeping them from disappearing into the crowd. They recognize that their coldness is just a boundary and their solitude is just a choice. They are finally free from the burden of being the world's emotional caretaker. They move through the world with a calm heart, knowing that while they may have fewer friends, the life they have is finally their own. They have traded the fake light of the crowd for the steady, honest glow of their own spirit. The transition into this higher state of being brings a new kind of social intelligence. The empath loner now views the world through the lens of energetic economy. They see that most social gatherings are just loud attempts to avoid the self. Because they have faced their own shadow, they can see the shadows of others hiding behind small talk and forced laughter. This makes them appear like an outsider, but in reality, they are the most present person in the room. They are the only ones not running away from the truth of the moment. They have moved past the need to be understood by everyone. They accept that most people will only see them through the lens of their own projections. This clarity changes how they handle new people. When a person approaches with a hidden agenda or a need for a victim to save, the empath loner does not engage. They do not get angry or defensive. They simply remain a solid wall of truth. They have learned that you do not need to fight a shadow. You only need to be the light that reveals it. This lack of reaction often makes the other person leave quickly, as there is no fuel for their ego to burn. The empath is no longer a source of supply for those who live on drama. They have closed the doors to their energy and only open them for those who bring peace and genuine respect. Eventually, this path leads to a deep sense of internal peace that does not depend on the environment. Whether they are in a crowded room or a quiet forest, their internal state remains the same. They have reached a point where the external world no longer dictates their internal weather. They have integrated their need for solitude with their ability to function in the world. They are in the world, but not of it. This is the final victory of the empath loner. They have mastered the art of being alone without being lonely, and being among people without losing themselves. They are finally the masters of their own house.